Welcome, dear viewers. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee.
If you're reading this, it means I've finally broken the rule. I don't know how much time I have left, or how long I can stay awake. But I need to get this out before they realize what I've done. Before it realizes I know what it is. The rule was simple. Never serve table 6. That's it. One sentence. No explanation. Just those 5 words scrawled in permanent marker on the inside of my locker door the first night I clocked in at Mel's all-night diner. At first I thought it was a joke. Maybe some hazing ritual for new employees. But I quickly learned it wasn't a prank. It was a warning. And I didn't listen. I got the job 2 weeks ago. I was broke, desperate, and a bit burned out from my last gig at a corporate call center. My roommate found the ad online, now hiring overnight staff. Competitive pay. No experience needed. Sounded too good to be true. The diner itself sat on the edge of town, where the streetlights grew sparse and the fog rolled in heavy over the 2-lane road. Mel's all-night diner had a faded neon sign that buzzed faintly even during the day, and inside it looked like it hadn't been updated since the 60s. Checkered floor tiles, vinyl booths, and the smell of burnt coffee soaked into the walls. I met the manager, Ed, on my first day. Tall, wiry, with a voice like gravel. He barely looked at me as he handed over the keys to my locker and an apron. Graveyard's yours. Midnight to 8. Don't mess up the orders. Don't fall asleep on the job. And whatever you do, never serve table 6. I blinked. What's wrong with table 6? Ed didn't answer. He just looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. His eyes were glassy, pale, like they'd seen too much. Then he just walked off. That first night was uneventful. The diner was mostly dead, no pun intended. A couple of truckers, a late-shift nurse, one guy who came in and didn't order anything, just stared out the window until sunrise. But I couldn't stop thinking about that rule. Table 6 sat in the far corner of the diner, tucked just under a flickering ceiling light. The laminated menu sat untouched in the middle of the table, and the ketchup bottle looked full but unused. At first I avoided it easily. Who would sit all the way in the corner when the booths by the window had a view? But then came the third night. The night someone sat at table 6. It was around 3 a.m., always the deadest part of the shift. The quiet part, where the diner hums with the low buzz of the fridge and the crackling jukebox that plays Elvis on a loop. I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the front door jingled. I looked up, expecting one of the regulars or maybe a homeless guy looking for coffee. But it was none of them. It was a man in a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. His clothes looked too formal, too old-fashioned for this town, like he stepped out of a black-and-white photo. He didn't say a word. He just walked to table 6 and sat down. I froze. The dishcloth went limp in my hands. He didn't touch the menu. He didn't look around. Just sat there, completely still, facing the kitchen pass-through window. Not even facing me. I looked toward the back office where Ed usually hid during the night shift, but the door was closed. No light. No help. I told myself it was fine. Customers come and go. Maybe the rule was outdated. Maybe it was just superstition. Still, I didn't approach. I busied myself with pretend cleaning. Rearranged salt shakers. Refilled napkin holders. Anything to avoid looking at him. But every time I glanced up, he was watching me. His head never turned, but somehow I felt it. A pressure on the back of my skull. My nerves fraying like torn wires. After 20 minutes, he hadn't moved. No order. No drink. Not even a twitch. I finally worked up the courage and approached. "Sir," I said, my voice cracking, "can I get you anything?" He didn't answer. I cleared my throat. Kitchen closes at 8, but I can still. That's when he moved. Not his arms. Not his mouth. His eyes. They rolled back in his head. Fully white. No pupils. And his lips slowly began to part. There was no tongue. Just a black, wet void. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. When I looked again, he was gone. The booth was empty. The ketchup bottle stood untouched. But on the table sat a folded napkin. I didn't want to touch it, but my hands reached for it anyway. Inside was a single word, written in the same thick black marker I'd seen in my locker. Tonight. I didn't tell Ed. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? Hey, some void-eyed stranger sat in the cursed booth and disappeared without a trace? I decided I'd quit. First thing in the morning. Leave my apron, hand in the keys, and never look back. But the morning came and Ed was waiting for me at the door. You saw him, didn't you? I didn't answer. He nodded slowly as if that was the answer. Thought you might, he said. You made it longer than most. Then he handed me a thick envelope. It was filled with cash. Crisp bills, all unmarked. Consider it hazard pay. I should have left. But I didn't. Not for the money. Not even out of fear. I stayed because of curiosity. Because I wanted to know who, or what, sat at table 6. And most of all, I wanted to know what would happen if I broke the rule. That night, I came to work early. I brought a thermos of coffee, a notebook, a camera. I was going to document everything. I was going to be ready. But nothing happened. 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No customer. No shadowy man. Then at exactly 3:33 a.m. the jukebox turned on by itself. Not Elvis this time. Just static. And from across the diner at table 6, a voice echoed out. I'm hungry. I didn't think. I grabbed a menu, poured a coffee, walked straight to the table. Heart pounding, mouth dry. No one was there. But the air was colder. The booth cushion damp. And on the table was a plate, already full. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Bacon. I hadn't made it. I didn't even see the kitchen lights turn on. The coffee in my hand turned ice cold in seconds. I backed away slowly. But the plate? The food? It began to rot. Right in front of me. The eggs curdled into gray sludge. The toast blackened. The bacon twitched. And the whisper came again. You broke the rule. I ran. Out of the diner. Into the road. Left my apron. My phone. Everything. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town. But now I think it's too late. Because tonight, as I sit here typing this from a motel 3 cities away, I got a knock at the door. There was no one there. Just a room service tray. And on it, a single plate of scrambled eggs. And a napkin that read, Table 6 is ready for you. I didn't eat the eggs. I couldn't. Even though I was miles from the diner, holed up in a rundown motel where the walls sweat nicotine and the front desk clerk doesn't blink. Even though I hadn't eaten in nearly 24 hours and my stomach groaned like a dying engine. That tray was the last thing I wanted near me. Because it wasn't just eggs. Not anymore. It smelled wrong. Not spoiled, something deeper. Like the scent of earth after a grave has been opened. The napkin with those 6 words, Table 6 is ready for you, was still sitting next to the plate. Same handwriting. Same marker. Same intent. I threw the tray outside the motel door and shoved the deadbolt into place. Then I turned every light on, pulled the cheap curtains tight, and sat on the edge of the bed for hours just staring at the door. Waiting. But nothing came. By morning the tray was gone. I asked the clerk if anyone had collected it, room service, housekeeping, anyone. He just stared at me, lips dry and cracked, then said, We don't do food here. Of course they didn't. But I knew what I saw. What I smelled. What I felt. It wasn't just the food that followed me. Something from that booth had taken notice. It had picked me. Marked me. And I was starting to believe there was nowhere I could run that would be far enough. Still I tried. I left town by bus. Changed my name on the passenger list. Picked a random city 3 states over. Somewhere warm, dry, and forgettable. No one knew me there. No connection. No history. A fresh start. I rented a tiny basement apartment from a retired nurse named Paula. She was kind. A little nosy but harmless. She didn't ask about my past. I didn't offer. For a few days things were quiet. No whispers. No notes. No rotting food. But on the 5th night I woke up gasping. Because I'd been dreaming of the diner. It was always the same dream. I stood behind the counter just like I had during every graveyard shift. The place was empty except for one booth, table 6. The flickering ceiling light was buzzing, louder than usual, a strobe rhythm that made my stomach churn. Something was sitting there. Only I couldn't see it. The booth was in shadows, impossibly dark, like a void in the fabric of the room. And from that blackness I heard the same words. I'm hungry. Then I'd wake up, drenched in sweat, the smell of scorched bacon in my nose. I started locking every door. Pushing furniture in front of the windows. I even blocked the basement stairs with Paula's old rocking chair. She noticed. Asked if I was okay. I lied. Just paranoid, I said. She laughed. Well, kid, paranoia's just awareness in overdrive. That night I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps upstairs. Not Paula's. Heavier. Slower. Then the door to the basement creaked. I stared at it. Waited. Nothing came down. But in the morning, sitting at the foot of the basement stairs, was another tray. Scrambled eggs. Toast. And a napkin that read, Last chance to serve. I lost it. I stormed up to Paula's place and demanded to know if anyone had been inside. She looked at me confused. What tray? There was food. A tray of food on my. Sweetie, she interrupted, I don't even have a tray. I pushed past her back to the stairs. It was gone. Not even a crumb. Like it had never been there at all. That was when I realized something deeper, something worse, was happening. This wasn't just haunting me. It was testing me. It wanted something. And it was willing to wait. Willing to stalk. Willing to whisper and rot and crawl its way across whatever boundary separates the normal world from that booth. But I wasn't going to be hunted anymore. If it wanted me to serve table 6, then I'd serve it. On my own terms. I left Paula a note, said I had to take care of something. Didn't explain. Couldn't. Bought a burner phone, filled my backpack with essentials, and took the first bus heading back toward the diner. The ride was long. The skies gray. The roads soaked in a constant drizzle. Every town we passed looked smaller than the last, swallowed by fog and cracked highways. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the dream returned. The diner. The booth. The shadow. I'm hungry. By the time I arrived at the edge of town, Mel's all-night diner stood exactly the way I left it. The neon sign still buzzed faintly above the cracked parking lot. One of the windows had been boarded up. The open sign was gone. I approached slowly, heart hammering in my chest. The front door was unlocked. No lights on inside. No staff. Just the distant hum of an unseen fridge, and the faint smell of old grease. And in the far corner, flickering beneath the broken light, table 6. I took slow, deliberate steps toward it. With each footfall the air grew heavier. My breath fogged in front of me despite the warmth outside. The ketchup bottle still sat there. The menu. The salt shaker. And on the table, a plate. Full. Waiting. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Bacon. I sat across from it. The seat was warm. Across from me the booth looked empty, yet not. The shadows were thicker than they should have been, moving slightly, like a heartbeat behind a curtain. I reached forward. Touched the plate. Steam still rose from it. Then the whisper came again. You finally came back. I didn't respond. I reached into my backpack and pulled out the camera. Pressed record. This is for proof, I whispered aloud. This is for anyone else who ends up working here, who sees the rule and thinks it's a joke. The whisper laughed. A low, crackling sound like leaves dragging across asphalt. You think this is about proof? I raised the camera higher, pointed it at the shadows. Then what is it about? There was silence. Then something shifted. A form moved from the darkness. Not a person. Not really. It wore the shape of one, tall, draped in a coat, face hidden in shadows. But the proportions were wrong. Elongated. Bet. It's about the bargain. I swallowed hard. What bargain? You took the money, it said. You stayed past your first night. You saw. You knew. You tricked me. No, it hissed. You served. Even if you didn't bring the plate. Even if you didn't pour the coffee. You were there. You were part of it. That is the rule's power. The diner seemed to tremble. Light bulbs flickered. The jukebox crackled. And then, from every booth, every stool, every corner of that cursed diner, eyes opened. Eyes in the walls. In the floors. In the mirrors. Watching me. Hungry. I stood up, knocking the plate to the floor. You can't keep me here. I don't belong to this place. The figure across the booth began to rise. Bones cracked. Joints popped. You're already part of it, it said. You always were. You just didn't know until now. I turned to run. But every exit was gone. Doors bricked over. Windows blacked out. I was alone with them. With it. And still, from the shadows, the whisper repeated. Serve. Or be served. I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up the plate from the floor, shattered now, yolk dripping down my wrist, and I threw it at the booth. It passed through the figure and hit the wall. Silence. Then the lights went out. And the whispers began to laugh. 1,000 voices. None of them mine. And I realized then. I was the order now. Have you ever screamed but nothing came out? Not from fear. Real fear doesn't give you the luxury of sound. It wraps its hands around your lungs and crushes until there's nothing left but silence and the pounding of your own heart. That was me, frozen in the darkness of Mel's diner. Every window sealed. Every door vanished. Trapped inside a building that had become a tomb, with eyes watching me from every surface and something across from me, something that wanted to eat more than food. Wanted me. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. When the lights came back on, I was standing in the middle of the dining room. The booth was empty. The shattered plate was gone. And in my hand was an apron. Clean. My name stitched neatly over the chest pocket. The name I never told anyone. The name I had buried. The name I hadn't used in years. "We start at midnight," a voice said behind me. I turned fast, but no one was there. Only the kitchen door swinging slightly as if someone had just walked through. And the smell of coffee, fresh and bitter, hanging in the air like a dare. I should have run. Again. But where would I go? This place had erased every exit, swallowed my escape plan whole. It had known I'd return. Maybe it had even made sure of it. And now it wanted me to play along. To put on the apron. To serve. To participate. I told myself I'd go along with it, just long enough to understand the rules. Just long enough to find a crack in the walls and answer anything. But the moment I tied the apron around my waist, I heard a chime behind me. The diner door had returned. And someone walked in. She looked normal. A woman in her mid-40s, brown coat, tired eyes. She slid into booth 3 like she'd been doing it every day for years. I stood there stunned. Are you real?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "You knew?" I nodded slowly. She waved her hand. "Coffee black. 2 eggs. No toast." Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not supposed to talk about it. Not during service." I brought her the coffee. The eggs. She nodded, satisfied. And just like that she faded. Not left. Not walked out. Just faded like a signal dropping from a radio. More customers came. Each one stranger than the last. A man with a sunburn so deep it cracked his skin like dried paint. A girl with no eyes, yet she ordered with perfect clarity. A man in a tattered military uniform who stared at the ceiling the whole time he chewed on nothing. They all ordered. They all ate. And none of them looked at table 6. That booth remained empty. Flickering. Buzzing. Waiting. Like a spider in the corner of a web it didn't need to weave anymore. Because its prey had already walked inside. Hours passed, or maybe none did. There were no clocks. No sunrises. Only a ringing bell each time a new guest walked in, and a whisper of wind each time one left. Until eventually I was alone again. The lights dimmed. The air thickened. And the phone behind the counter began to ring. Rotary. Yellowed plastic. I picked it up. No voice. Just static. And then, midnight menu. Flipped the page. I looked down at the menu beside the register. There was a tab I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it. A new page slid out. The dishes weren't food. Not in the traditional sense. Memory loaf. Drenched in guilt reduction. Ego tartare, served raw with regret glaze. Childhood crumble, topped with broken promises. Each item listed as serving cost in a column to the right. Sight. Voice. Name. Hope. One item was scribbled at the bottom, written in the same ink as the old napkins. Table 6, only if they ask first. Price, unknown. My hands shook as I closed the menu. The lights snapped off. And I heard the bell above the door ring one last time. A man walked in. Or at least, he used to be a man. His face had no features, just a smooth sheet of flesh where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. He wore a diner uniform identical to mine. Same name on the chest. He took a seat at table 6. The lights flickered. The air dropped 10 degrees. And from every booth, every chair, every dark crack in the floor and ceiling, I heard them whisper again. He asked, "You serve?" I was already holding the tray. I didn't remember picking it up. Didn't remember the kitchen door opening or the plate appearing. But there it was. The plate was covered. A silver lid. Polished. I could see my reflection warped in its surface. My hand moved on its own. Carrying it. Closer. Closer. The man thing sat perfectly still, the smooth canvas of his face twitching ever so slightly. I reached the booth. Placed the tray in front of him. He did not move. But the lid began to rattle. Like something alive underneath. And then, clang. The lid fell off. Inside the tray was my face, perfectly preserved. Eyes wide open. Mouth agape in a silent scream. A mirror of the terror I wore in that moment. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The faceless man reached for the plate. His fingers stretching, elongating, bones snapping as they curved around the edges like spider legs. He picked up my face, pressed it against his own. And slowly, horrifyingly, it stuck. Blood seeped around the edges. Tendons attached. Veins writhed like worms. And then, looking at me with my own eyes, he smiled. And said, "Now you sit." I ran. This time the door didn't vanish. But when I burst through it, I didn't find the outside. No cars. No sky. No motel. No city. Only another diner. Same counter. Same booths. Only the sign had changed. Mel's Afternight Diner. A new shift. A new level. I wasn't escaping. I was descending. And table 6 waited still. Would you like me to continue with part 4, 2000 words? Have you ever felt your own mind slipping, like the floor of your thoughts is tilting beneath you, and no matter how hard you try to stand, you just keep sliding further into something you don't understand? That's what it was like walking into the other diner. Everything looked the same, booths, counters, greasy menu letters flickering under fluorescent lights. But it wasn't. The air was heavier. The shadows stuck to the corners like tar. Even the silence had texture, like it could wrap itself around your throat and squeeze. I wasn't at Mel's anymore. Or maybe I was. Just not the version meant for people like me. The door slammed shut behind me. And vanished. I turned around, running my hands along the wall. Just stainless steel and tile. No hinges. No cracks. Nothing. I was sealed in. Again. But now the walls pulsed, almost imperceptibly, like lungs. Like the building was breathing. Then the lights flickered. A man in a blood-soaked cook's apron stepped out from the kitchen. His eyes were sunken in. Lips blistered. Fingers raw and stripped of skin, bone exposed in patches like peeled fruit. And stitched into the apron above his chest was a name. Marvin. The same name from the photo in the back room at the real Mel's. The one who disappeared in 2003. The one who never quit. He didn't speak. Just nodded toward the counter. I sat. Even though every instinct in me screamed not to. He slid me a napkin. Not a menu. I unfolded it. There were only 5 words written in smeared ink. The shift ends when you serve. My throat dried. Serve? Who? Marvin just nodded to the far corner. Table 6. Still empty. Still waiting. The diner's layout had twisted slightly. No longer a clean rectangle but a winding L shape, distorted like a funhouse mirror version of the one I came from. And from where I sat, I couldn't see table 6 anymore. Only the faint hum. The flicker of the overhead light that never turned off, never changed, always buzzed like an insect stuck inside a jar. And something else now too. A low thrum. Like a heartbeat. Or chewing. The first customer walked in. You could call it that. She looked like she'd been dug out of a shallow grave. Mud still clung to her knees. Her skin gray-green and rubbery. Her jaw unhinged slightly as she ordered, tongue flicking side to side like a snake tasting the air. 1 plate of silence. Extra thick. I froze. She slapped the counter. Her fingers left bruises in the metal. You're on shift now. You serve. So I went to the kitchen. Everything back there was rusted. Bubbling. Wrong. Meat that still twitched. Pots that hissed words I didn't understand. A fryer that bled instead of boiling. But somehow I found what she asked for. It looked like a cut of raw fog, quivering slightly, reeking of copper and ozone. I plated it. Served it. She smiled. And faded. That became the pattern. Each new patron was less human than the last. A preacher with 12 mouths and no eyes who demanded a sermon printed on liver. A toddler-sized man with antlers who requested a glass of moonlight wrung from a trader's scream. A mother with a hollow stomach filled with teeth who just wanted to watch. Each time I served, the weight on my chest grew heavier. And each time, table 6 flickered closer. Sometimes I'd blink and see something sitting there in the corner of my vision. Just for a second. A tall figure. Limbs too long. Face blurred like a VHS tape paused mid-frame. Hands twitching like it was waiting for something. Waiting for me. I tried not to look. But I knew what was happening. Every dish I served, every plate handed off, was pulling me closer. Like currency I didn't know I was spending. Like I was feeding it without ever placing a single thing on its table. Because that's how the diner worked. You don't serve table 6 directly. You just feed it enough. And it comes to you. Marvin never left the kitchen. I'd hear him muttering sometimes. Don't stop. Don't quit. You quit, you stay. You stay, it eats. I asked him what that meant. He didn't answer. But I saw it in his hands. Burned. Peeled. Gnawed. He had quit once. And he'd been paying for it ever since. On the 7th night, if you could call it that, I started hearing whispers from the jukebox. It wasn't plugged in. Didn't matter. Voices played on a loop. You fed it enough. Now it feeds. I spun around. Table 6 was full now. And not just one figure. 3. Each wore my face. But not the same versions. One with eyes burned out. One with hands gnawed to the bone. One with lips stitched shut, whispering prayers in my voice. They didn't eat. They just stared. And I knew. This was the last order. I turned back to the kitchen. Marvin was gone. On the prep table was a single dish. Cloche covered. No label. But I knew what it was. My last shift meal. And I was the dish. I lifted the lid. Inside wasn't food. It was a memory. My first night at Mel's. Standing at the register. Nervous. Hopeful. Still believing this was just a job. The plate pulsed. Showing another memory. Quitting my old job. Driving through the rain. Seeing the help wanted sign glow through the downpour like a beacon. Another. Sitting in the back room. Reading the rules. Laughing at rule number 6. Never serve table 6. I picked up the plate. The booth across the room called to me. 3 versions of me. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. As I approached, they parted. One slid aside. An empty seat remained. The moment I sat down, the lights dimmed to black. The whispers stopped. The diner went silent. And then I saw it. Not through my eyes, but through all of them. Every version of me. Across every night. Every loop. Every shift. Table 6 isn't one booth. It's a hunger. A collector. A furnace that burns identity and memory and self. And the more you serve it, the more you become part of it. And then I woke up. In the real diner. Lights on. Boots clean. Coffee brewing. I was behind the counter. And a customer had just walked in. She looked confused. Young. Nervous. She walked up to me. Hey, I just applied. They told me to start tonight. I stared. Down at my chest. The apron was still there. Only the name stitched into it had changed. Marvin. You might be wondering how I got out. How I escaped the trap of the endless shifts, the cursed booth, the thing that waits at table 6. The truth? I didn't. Not really. That version of me, the one who sat down, who served, who stared into the stitched eyes of himself across the booth, he's still there. He became part of the cycle. And the me telling this now? I'm just what's left. The ghost riding the gears of the machine, keeping the place running until the next fool shows up and reads the rules too fast. Until they laugh at the last line. Until they ignore the whispering hum of something watching. The girl across the counter looked young. 18 maybe. Wide eyes. Nervous smile. Worn sneakers. She was me. 5 weeks ago. Maybe 5 years. Time didn't mean much in here anymore. The manager was nowhere to be seen as usual. No one to train her. Except me. So I welcomed her with a nod, handed her the same crumpled rules sheet I once read under flickering light. Her lips moved as she scanned the list. She paused at number 6. Then laughed. And I felt the walls sigh. The next few nights blurred into each other. She asked questions. I gave vague answers. Every now and then, I caught her staring at table 6 from the corner of her eye. Is that booth always empty? She asked once. I lied. Said it was broken. That customers complained it was too cold over there. She bought it, for a while. One night a man came in. Middle-aged. Pale. Rain dripping off a tan coat. He walked straight up to the counter and pointed at the jukebox. You ever hear it talk? He asked. My heart stopped. He wasn't a regular. Hell, he wasn't even alive. I could smell it on him. That damp, grave dirt stench that clung to those who served too long. I nodded slowly. You were one of us, I said. He smiled. Teeth chipped and yellow. I was the cook. Before Marvin. Before you. Table 6 liked me a lot. He leaned in. It still remembers my voice. And then he left. Didn't eat. Didn't order. Just vanished when I looked away. But that night, the lights above table 6 turned off for the first time. The girl noticed. You see that? I lied again. No. But the booth wasn't empty anymore. It never really was. Just sleeping. Waiting. And now it stirred. She started asking about the rules more often. Why don't we serve table 6? What happens if we do? Do you think it's a prank? I told her the same thing they told me. Don't ask. Don't try. Don't go near it. She didn't listen. None of us do, not at first. Curiosity's the real menu here. And the diner feeds on it. On her 7th night, she disappeared for 10 minutes. Came back pale. Didn't say where she went. But her hands were shaking, and her eyes wouldn't stop darting toward the booth in the corner. What's in there? She asked again. I looked at her, really looked at her. And I realized what I'd become. I wasn't a coworker. I was the warning. The flickering bulb. The final breath before the scream. Later that night, I found her crouched under the counter, sobbing. I saw myself, she whispered. Sitting there. At table 6. I was smiling. But it wasn't me. Her eyes were wrong. I knew what came next. I think I served her, she said. My stomach dropped. What did you give her? She shook her head. It wasn't food. It It was a moment, something I remembered, from when I was 5. A dream I haven't thought about in years. And just like that, it made sense. Table 6 doesn't feed on burgers or fries or coffee. It feeds on identity, memories, moments, echoes of self. Every time you look too long, wonder too hard, you give it something. And when you serve it, even unknowingly, it takes more. The next night she was gone. Not fired. Not missing. Just not there. No record. No name tag. No locker in the back. When I checked the break room photo board, the picture of her smiling with the staff was gone. In its place, a blank frame. Still warm. So here I am. Behind the counter. Serving coffee. Slinging hash. Pretending not to see the new guy sweeping by the fryer, mouthing the rules under his breath. Another shift. Another loop. The jukebox hums. The lights flicker. And somewhere in the back booth, something watches with all my faces. You might still be wondering, why not leave? Because you can't. You don't just work here. You become part of it. Like grease in the tile. Like smoke in the vent hood. Like blood in the grout lines between the bathroom floor tiles. Even if your body walks out, your shadow stays. And the next time someone steps into the light, your name's stitched into their apron. So if you ever find yourself on a midnight road, hungry, tired, and a glowing sign for a 24/7 diner calls out through the fog, do yourself a favor. Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't ask. And if you do stop, never sit at table 6. Never look at what's sitting there. And whatever you do, never ever serve. Because the shift doesn't end when the sun rises. It ends when the booth is full. And trust me, it's always hungry. The end.